Folks, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for listening in. Today we have an extremely special treat. I am actually getting to interview a candidate for Congress, the wonderful Mary Burkett for the 2nd District of Utah. Now, before we dive into all that lovely policy, I really want to know, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Great, I'm happy to hear it. So, first of all, first thing people are watching right now is, who's this Mary Burkett? Why should I care? What makes her different? But before we get, and we will get into all that, hopefully a lot in this episode, but I want to talk about what are you running as? Are you running as a Republican or as a conservative, a libertarian, what? And why?
I am a conservative who happens to be a Republican. I believe in the Constitution. And we conservatives are all about conserving the Constitution. It's pretty shocking to me how far we've strayed from it. And earlier today, I was talking to someone who thought that, you should get into Congress and start making changes immediately. And I agree, but I don't have a magic wand. So darn it. But so
if that
were
the case, Ocasio-Cortez would have destroyed us by now.
Well, sure. Absolutely. So it's okay if she destroys herself. We just want to stay out of it, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. About 12 years ago, maybe closer to 15 years ago, I was standing at the kitchen sink, getting dishes into the dishwasher, and my husband was watching something on the news that I could hear, and it was CNN, which was kind of a surprise. And a commentator there, said something about the Constitution that I knew wasn't correct. I'm like 3 credits short of minoring in history in college. And so I took a lot of Constitution classes and history classes. And I love history anyway, American history in particular. So I stopped what I was doing, went to the other room, pulled out our copy of the Constitution. Yes, I've always been a nerd in that.
The family Bible, Constitution. Okay, right.
Yeah. So I grabbed the Constitution, I flipped through. I do not remember what amendment it was. It was probably something obscure. I knew it was wrong. I read it and I go, well, I'll be darned. That guy was very wrong about what he just said. And I realized how many times have I heard things about the Constitution that were incorrect. And I didn't realize it was incorrect. So I went on this journey. I read everything I could. Founders.
How long was this CNN interaction from today?
Oh, gosh, probably 15 years ago.
Okay, so this is a 15-year-long journey.
15-year journey, yep. And I spent probably the first 6 months after that I went to the library and I got everything I could get on the founders. I did Skousen, Hayek, Bastiat, all the McCullough or biographies that he wrote about. And I'm a big Harry Truman fan, which we'll talk about later, and why I like him so much. And I realized, okay, I've got to do something more than just sit here. And it was about the time, so I guess it's like, gosh, longer than 15 years, because it was when or not quite 15 years. I guess I'd been reading and everything for about 2 years, and then the Tea Party took off. And so I got involved in that, and we had meetings at my house, and it was great because all these wonderful people were coming to my home, and we were talking about things that really mattered. And we were part of, not demonstrations, but gatherings in the park. And we just started talking about what the heck, and we've allowed it to happen. See, that's the other thing that I really like about conservatives. For the most part, we accept responsibility. We know we're the problem. And so we fix ourselves, and then we go out and try to fix other things, the way things are going. And I got involved in the county party. I ran, my first election was for state central committee, and I won. I think everybody in the room was surprised. They couldn't have been more surprised than me. It's gone to a county convention. And I got up there and gave my speech, and I got elected. That was pretty cool. After that was a 2-year term. And after that, I took 2 years off of politics. My husband and I had some changes we wanted to make in our lives and downsize and all that kind of stuff. So it took us about 2 years to do that. Got a call one night from someone who's active in the party here in Washington County, Utah. And he said, Mary, we need you to run for vice chair. Help us out here. We know you're organized. And I said, okay. And
what else does one say, you know?
well, I thought about it for a couple of days. My husband and I talked about it, and it was one of those, well, why not? And it was really nice because I ran without an opponent. So I was just elected by acclamation, and hey, this is even better. If you can do that, you win that way, right?
Right.
And I loved it. And I found really quickly that the vice chair does the work and the chair makes the decisions. And I was okay with that at the time because I knew the chair I was working with made good decisions. Okay. But had he not, I would have spoken up, and he knew it. And we used to talk about that. He'd tease me about that. We had a governor race at the time, and our governor, Gary Herbert, heck of a nice guy, like everybody in Utah, he's a heck of a nice guy. Not a good governor, in my opinion. He had a great opponent, Jonathan Johnson, and so I resigned as vice chair of the county party and went to work for Jonathan. I was his field director here. And even though he lost the primary, and that was really sad, when he told me, Mary, did you know Washington County was my best county? I didn't know that. Yeah. So ever since then, we've been really good buds. He's a good guy. And I hope someday he runs for governor again.
Okay.
So that's kind of what started it. And then I ran for, when I was vice chair, I was state central committee, and then I ran for it. And let's see, I ran earlier this year for state central committee. I lost by just a couple of votes, which is a bummer. But afterward, I thought, well, that just means I have more time for my campaign. So why do I care, right? So yeah, and in 2018, I ran for Congress in this district, but I did everything myself. And we have a caucus convention system here in Utah. We have caucus meetings, all the precincts statewide meet on the same night. In 2020, it will be March 24th, Tuesday night. We'll meet in our precinct meetings. We will elect state delegates and county delegates. Mm-hmm. We know from history that 70% of today's delegates will run again and get reelected next year in 2020, but there's 30% that will be new. And so the other thing that's kind of cool about Utah is if you win the nomination, if you win 60% of your delegates, and there are 840 delegates, if you win 60% of those delegates, you've got the nomination.
In a state like Utah.
Yeah. Now, we also have a law that was passed a couple of years ago that most conservatives don't like. It's called SB 54.
Okay.
Excuse me. There was a group of people who stepped up and said, we don't like the caucus convention system because it's an elite group. And I don't know where they get the word elite, but that's how they describe it. An elite group that can go to caucus nights. And there are firefighters and nurses, et cetera, that can't go. So we think we should have an open primary. Well, they had an initiative, and the people who backed this were the people with a lot of money.
Okay.
Our governor, bless his little pointed head, he started out saying he wished he vetoed SB 54. But then when Jonathan beat him at convention, forced him into a primary, he decided he wanted to get away from the caucus convention system. Little lapse in principle there, in my opinion.
Keep going. Yeah.
The people who wanted the open primary did an initiative, the petition drive. Yeah. Those of us who want to keep the caucus convention system only, we found out that there was a lot of fraud going on. The other side had hired people who were not telling the truth when they were getting signatures. So we went out, there is a provision to go to these people and say, will you please remove your name from the petition? And we won that. We got out there and we got people to remove their names so they didn't qualify. They have to wait 4 years to bring that topic up again. However, the moneyed people are still out there. Now the Republican Party challenged the ruling. It is unconstitutional. And we had an incredible donor named Dave Bateman who stepped up and said, I will pay for the lawsuit through the Supreme Court.
Whoa.
And he did. We were bummed. Yeah, we were bummed that the Supreme Court would not hear our case because the appellate judge gave us a path. He showed us how to approach this because he believed he was one of 3 judges. He's the chief judge of the appellate court in Colorado. he was the only one who said, yeah, you're right. It is unconstitutional. The other two, I don't remember what they said. But anyway, we knew that was going to happen. So we went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court turned us down. They didn't hear our case. But we have 4 years now, and we want to bolster up the caucus convention system, because if we go to an open primary, only people with deep pockets like Mitt Romney are going to ever be able to run for office. It's
Right.
true. And
Right.
they'll
You're
all
right.
be moderates, and they won't have principles, and they won't care about the regular people. The small counties, one of the really great things about this district is most of it is rural.
Mhm.
And those small counties in particular understand that the caucus convention system makes them relevant. And
Yes.
primary, they will become irrelevant. And that's wrong. No
Yes.
one in this country, in this process, should ever think that they're irrelevant.
Which is a reason why your campaign, and the reason why I really wanted to have you on my show, is because it in its legal sense, yes, it's a local campaign, but it really is a broader national issue. Your
Yeah.
fight really is a fight for the whole country to be considering. And
Right.
that you talked about principles and having principles, and you going against these moderates, with establishment moderates, without any
Right.
principles.
Yeah.
I want to hit the rewind button on Miss Mary's cassette tape. Back when you were Miss Mary, you just came out. But between the time of now and when you came out of your mother's womb, what was the point, and what led up to the point where you thought of yourself as a conservative, and why?
Probably. Now, I was married pretty young. I had 6 children. I was
Okay.
probably mid-30s before I realized, because
Really?
I always cared about the Constitution. I just didn't think a whole lot about it. But I was 31. I was a single mom with 6 kids, no money, no marketable skills. Couldn't make a living, so I went to college, and with 6 children and no money. And
How'd you get through with that? How'd
one
you do?
word, well, 2 words: prayer and miracles. That's it.
3 words technically, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
don't even necessarily attribute it to yourself, but rather your faith in a sort of transcendental power.
Yeah. I believe when you're on the right path, the how will always present itself. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. And I could start and finish in less than 3 years. That's not supposed to happen, but it did in my case. And I think it will in others if they're willing to take that leap of faith, and say, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I took a lot of history classes. And that's where I discovered how to put a label on what I was thinking and feeling about the country and about the Constitution. I didn't know I was a conservative because I wasn't familiar with those terms until I got into college, and bombed my way through. I always say I bombed my way through. It's true. I took night classes. I took summer classes. Summer was great because my children would be with their dad for long periods of time in the summer, and I could take a couple of classes and be home by myself, do my homework easily. I didn't have a whole lot of fun during that 3 years, but that wasn't the point. I
No.
wanted to be self-sufficient.
Life really isn't fun at some stretches.
It's not, and that's okay because you always survive those. You grow and you move on.
So I really want to drill. This is fascinating to me. That what you said, you just had these ideas, these concepts, but not these labels.
Right.
What gave you these concepts? What gave you an appreciation of the Constitution? And
Oh my gosh. My parents, I don't like sugarcoating the whole parent thing. My parents were difficult people. It was
Okay.
very hard to be their child. Lots of problems,
Okay.
on both sides. But my dad was an Army veteran. And I remember at 10 years old standing in a grocery store. What my parents would do, they shopped at the grocery store once a month, and there were 4 kids in the family. Because my dad was a veteran, we went to the commissary on the base close to where we lived. And I don't know why my mom did it this way, but one Saturday she tore the list in half, gave one half to my dad and said, Mary, you go with him. Karen, my younger sister, you go with me. It was divide and conquer, right? And I was walking with my dad, pushing the cart, and there were, it was like canned fruits and canned vegetables. And my dad stopped in the middle of the aisle and he stretched out his arms and he said, look at all this food. look at all of this that we have. And he told me about the kids in Italy. He was one of the troops, he was in the infantry that liberated Rome in World War II. And he was at Anzio and all that. And he told me about the little kids who, as soon as they saw an American, they started trailing because they were hungry. They had no food. And as a soldier, Dad would give them what he had because he said, even though it wasn't very tasty, it beat the heck out of going hungry. And the little kids find them. These C rations and K rations. If you look up online, they're kind of sickening, but it was like they weren't much, but it saved those kids' lives that the Americans were willing to do that. And I think that's what really piqued my interest, that my parents were willing to tell us, you know, what the Depression was like. My dad grew up in abject poverty. My mom, on the other hand, grew up on a farm, and I remember her telling me during the Depression, she was maybe, oh gosh, she wasn't very old, but she said they didn't really feel the effects of the Depression because they had this big farm. And if there was something they needed that they didn't have, they would barter with a neighbor. So, you know, you'd have a, you know, bushel basket of corn and your neighbor didn't have any corn and you needed something they had. And so you traded and yeah, you didn't know.
It worked, yeah.
It also helped. She was the youngest of 8 children and she was quite a bit younger than her older siblings. So she was pretty spoiled and she knew it. But, you know, she didn't know. But my dad, on the other hand, had a really bad experience during the Depression. And he just taught us, you know, I grew up learning about a young man named Donald Tressler. He was somebody that my dad knew in the Army. He was still in his teens. My dad was 26 or 27 at this point in his career. In fact, tomorrow will be just 1 year since my dad died and he was 100 years old. I'm counting on those longevity genes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
We grew up, and it's kind of funny. My siblings and I talk about it even now. I still have one sibling alive. Two have passed away, but my brother and I have talked about how we grew up thinking Donald was a member of our family because my dad felt so responsible for him. And Donald, on my dad's 90th birthday, right around there, we had cousins visiting from back east, and he told them the story of Donald. And for the first time, we learned Donald literally died in my dad's arms. He had never told us that part of the story before. And we grew up thinking Donald was part of our family because my dad loved him so much. And I think my dad had some survivor's guilt that he couldn't protect Donald the way he wanted. And our children have grown up like Donald is a part of the family. And so my dad, I'm sure that's where it came from, you know, telling us about Donald, telling us about the hardships, a battle, and how important it is to remember you're an American. That means something. This is, and because of my faith, I know that we are an exceptional people. This is an exceptional country. I think this is the only country. I mean, look at it. In 1776, the highest level of comfort to be found was in the colonies. Highest, you know, level of good living was in the colonies. One of the reasons that King George treated it like an ATM. You know?
Right.
Long before anybody else had an ATM. All he had to do was taxes in the colonies, and he had plenty of money in his chest. So I think they were just seeds planted, you know, and then they started to bloom when I was in my 30s. And by the time I got to college and I knew what I wanted to study, what I wanted to do, I think that's really what it was. And I think for a lot of people, those seeds are planted as we grow up.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, that was such a great response. We're running out of time for this segment, guys. I can't wait to start drilling down in policy with you, Mary. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to have you on again.
Great, thanks.